Chapter XXX. Which deals with the graceful artifice and order that was taken to get our enamored gentleman out of the harsh penance in which he had put himself. The priest had not finished well, when Sancho said, "Well, my faith, Señor Lawyer, the one who did that feat was my master, and that it was a sin to give them freedom, because they all went there because they were great rascals." "Pestle," said Don Quixote at this time, "it is not up to the knights errant to find out if the afflicted, chained, and oppressed they meet along the roads are going that way, or are in that anguish, because of their faults or because of their graces. He only has to help them as the needy, keeping an eye on their sorrows and not on their mischief. And to whom it has seemed bad, except for the holy dignity of the licensed gentleman and his honorable person, I say that he knows little of the ailment of chivalry, and that he lies like a bastard, and this I will make known to him with my sword, where he is most long contained. Sir Knight, give your grace the gift that you have promised me, and that, according to him, you cannot get involved in another adventure, no matter how urgent it may be. Let your mercy soothe his chest." "I will keep quiet, my lady," said Don Quixote, "and I will repress the just anger that had already risen in my chest, and I will go quietly and peacefully until I fulfill the gift promised to you, but, in payment of this good wish, I beg you to tell me, who are the people from whom I have to give you due, satisfied and complete revenge. First of all, I want your Mercedes to know, my lords, that they call me. Which is that the king my father, who is called Tinacrio the Wise, and reached by his science that my mother, who was called the Queen Jaramilla, had to die before him, and that in a short time he also had to pass this life. That a huge giant, lord of a large island, which almost borders our kingdom, called Pandafilando de la Foscavista, I say that he knew that this giant, knowing that I was an orphan, was going to pass over my kingdom with great power, and he was going to do it to me. Remove everything, but that he could excuse all this ruin and disgrace if I wanted to marry him. But then, with some of my people, I set out for Spain, where I would find the remedy for my ills by finding a knight-errant, who was to be called, if I remember correctly, Don Azote or Don Quixote. That he had to be tall in body, dry in face, and that on the right side, below the left shoulder, or just there, he had to have a brown mole with certain hairs like bristles." Hearing this, Don Quixote said to his squire, "Here, Sancho, son, help me undress, for I want to see if I am the knight that wise king prophesied." "There's no reason to undress," said Sancho, "since I know your worship has a mole like that on the middle of your spine, which is a sign of being a strong man." "That's enough," Dorothea said, "because with friends you don't have to look at a few things. Because he, for his courtesy and magnificence, has promised me the gift of going with me wherever I take him, which will be nowhere else than to put him in front of Pandafilando de la Foscavista, so that he kills him and restores to me what he so against reason has me usurped. That if this knight of the prophecy, after having slain the giant, wished to marry me, that I should then grant myself without question for his lawful wife, and give him possession of my kingdom, together with that of my person. What do you think, Sancho my friend?" Don Quixote said at this point. "Can't you hear what's going on? Didn't I tell you? See if we already have a kingdom to rule and a queen to marry." "That's what I swear," said Sancho, "for the bastard who won't get married by opening Mr. Pantalito's throat." "Well, mount that is bad, queen. That's how the fleas in my bed come back." Then he went to take the reins of Dorothea's mule, and, making her stop, he fell on his knees before her, begging her to give him her hands to kiss them, as a sign that he received her as his queen and mistress. Who would not laugh at those around him, seeing the madness of the master and the simplicity of the servant? Indeed, Dorothea gave them to him, and promised to make him a great lord in her kingdom, when heaven did her so much good that she let her collect and enjoy it. And I say no more, it is not possible for me to face, not even for thinking, getting married, even if it were with the phoenix. What his master had recently said about not wanting to marry seemed so bad to Sancho that, with great anger, raising his voice, he said, "Judgment. Well, how is it possible that your worship questions marrying such a high princess as this? Is my lady Dulcinea, by chance, more beautiful? No, by the way, not even with half of it, and I'm yet to say that she doesn't get to the shoe of the one she's in front of her. Marry, marry later, I commend you to Satan, and take that kingdom that comes into the hands of Vobis, and, being king, make me marquis or advance, and then, even the devil takes it all." Don Quixote, having heard such blasphemies against his mistress Dulcinea, could not bear it, and, raising the sandeel, without speaking a word to Sancho and without telling him "this mouth is mine," gave him such 2 sticks that he struck him on the ground, and if it weren't for Dorothea telling her not to give him any more of her, no doubt she would take his life there. "Do you think," he said to him after a while, "you vile villain, uncommunicative scoundrel, that without a doubt you are, because you've put your tongue on the peerless Dulcinea, that if it weren't for the courage she instills in my arm, I would have him to kill a flea? She fights in me, and wins in me, and I live and breathe in her, and have life and being. Tell me, sir, if your worship is determined not to marry this great princess, of course it will not be your kingdom, and, not being so, what mercy can he do me? This is what I complain about. Let your grace marry this queen one by one, now that we have her here as if from heaven, and then she can go back to my lady Dulcinea. I say that I have not seen her so slowly, said Sancho, that she may have particularly noticed her beauty and the good parts of her point by point of her, but like this, in bulk, she seems fine to me. Now I excuse you, said Don Quixote, and forgive me for the anger I have given you, for the first movements are not in the hands of men. There's no more, Dorotea said, run, Sancho, and kiss your master's hand, and ask his forgiveness, and from now on be more aggressive in your praises and insults, and don't say anything bad about that lady Tobosa. Sancho went with his head bowed and asked his mistress for his hand, and he gave it to him with calm demeanor, and, after he had kissed her, he blessed her. While this was happening, they saw a gentleman on a donkey coming down the road where they were going, when he knew it was Gines de Pasamonte. Sancho raped him and knew him, and he had barely seen and known him, when he said in loud voices, "Ah, thief Ginesolo, leave my garment, let go of my life, do not get tired of my rest, leave my donkey, leave my gift, flee, whore, get away, thief, and forsake what is not yours." So many words or insults weren't necessary, because at first Gines jumped and, taking a trot that seemed like a race, at one point he absented himself and moved away from everyone. Sancho came to his grey and, embracing him, said, "How have you been, my darling, grey of my eyes, my companion? Let's take a look, Panza friend, where, how and when did you find Dulcinea?" "Sir," answered Sancho, "if you're going to tell the truth, no one sent the letter to me, because I didn't have any letter with me." "That's what you say," said Don Quixote, "because I found a little memory book in which I wrote it in my possession 2 days after your departure." "So be it," answered Sancho, "if I hadn't taken it in my memory when your grace read it to me, so I told it to a sacristan, who transferred it to me from my understanding." "And do you still have her in your memory, Sancho?" Don Quixote said. "No, sir," replied Sancho, "because after I gave it, as I saw that it would not be of more use, I gave it up. And if anything reminds me, it is that of the downtrodden, I say, of the sovereign lady, and the last thing, yours until death, the knight of the sad figure. And, between these two things, I put more than 300 souls and lives and my eyes." Chapter XXXI. Of the tasty arguments that passed between Don Quixote and Sancho Panza, his squire, with other events. "All this does not displease me, go ahead," said Don Quixote. "You arrived, and what was that Queen of Beauty doing?" "I didn't find her," answered Sancho, "except when she was digging 2 hanegas of wheat in a corral of her house." "But go ahead, when you gave her my letter," replied Sancho, "when I was going to give it to her, she was on the run from shaking a good part of the wheat that she had in the sieve, and she said to me, 'Put it, my friend, that letter on that sack, that I can't read until I finish writing down everything that is here.' She didn't ask me anything," said Sancho, "but I told her in the way that your worship, for your service, was left doing penance, naked from the waist up, stuck between these mountains as if you were a savage, sleeping on the ground, without eating bread on tablecloths or without combing his beard, crying and cursing his fortune." "He didn't read the letter," said Sancho, "because he said he didn't know how to read or write, before, he tore it up and made small pieces of it, saying that he did not want to give it to anyone to read, because his secrets would not be known in the place, and that what I had said in words about the love that your grace had for him was enough, and of the extraordinary penance that he remained doing for his cause. And, finally, he told me to tell your worship that he was kissing his hands, and that he was there with more desire to see him than to write to him, and that, thus, he begged and commanded that, seeing this, he should get out of those bushes and stop making nonsense, and then immediately set out on the road to Toboso. I'll see her, and she'll be satisfied with everything. Do you know what I am amazed at, Sancho? That it seems to me that you came and went through the air, since it took you a little more than 3 days to come and go from here to Toboso. It is not difficult for me to believe that in such a short time you have come and gone from this place to the Toboso. Well, as I have said, some wise friend must have carried you on the wing, without you noticing it. What do you think I should do now about what my wife tells me to go see her? That, although I see that I am obliged to fulfill her commandment, I also see myself unable to fulfill the gift that I have promised to the princess who comes with us, and force the law of chivalry to keep my word before my pleasure. But what I intend to do is to walk quickly and arrive quickly where this giant is, and, on arriving, I will cut off his head, and I will put the princess peacefully in her state, and immediately I will turn around to see the light that my senses illuminates, to whom I will give such apologies that she comes to accept my delay as good, since she will see that everything redounds to the increase of her glory and fame." "I," said Sancho, Does your grace think to walk this road in vain, and let pass and lose such a rich and important marriage as this one? Kaye, for God's sake, and be ashamed of what you have said, and take my advice, and forgive me, and marry later in the first place that has a priest, and if not, there is our graduate, who will do it perfectly. And that a bird in the hand is better than a flying vulture, because whoever has the right things and chooses poorly, no matter how well he gets angry, he will not take revenge. If the advice you give me about getting married is because I'll be king later, by killing the giant, and I'll be able to do favors to you and give you what was promised, let you know that without getting married I'll be able to fulfill your wish very easily, before entering the battle, that, emerging victorious from it, since I do not marry, they will give me a part of the kingdom, so that I can give it to whoever I want, and, in giving it to me, to whom do you want me to give it but to you? But look at your worship that I choose it for the navy, because, if the house does not satisfy me, I can embark my black vassals and do with them what I have already said. And your worship don't worry about going to see my lady Dulcinea, but go kill the giant, and let's conclude this business. You're right, and I'll have to take your advice about going with the princess before seeing Dulcinea. At this, Master Nicholas called out to them to wait a little, that they wanted to stop and drink at a little fountain that was there. While doing this, a boy who was on his way happened to pass by, who, starting to look very carefully at those who were at the fountain, shortly thereafter attacked Don Quixote and, embracing him by the legs, began to cry very deliberately, saying, Mister, doesn't your mercy know me? Well, take a good look at me, for I am that young man Andres who removed your grace from the oak tree where he was tied. Don Quixote recognized him, and, taking him by the hand, he turned to those who were there and said, Your Mercedes know that the past few days, when I was passing through a forest, I heard some cries and some very pitiful voices, as of a person in distress and needy. I went later, and found tied to an oak this boy who is now in front. I say that he was tied to the oak, naked from the middle of his body up, and a villain, who I later learned was his master, was whipping him open with the reins of a mare, and, just as I saw him, I asked him the cause of such an atrocious beating. Replied the course who was whipping him because he was his servant, and that certain carelessness he had was born more of a thief than a simple one. To which this boy said, Sir, you can't beat me except because I ask you for my wages. In resolution, I had him untied, and I took the villain's oath that he would take him with him and pay him 1 real over another, and even smoked. Not only did he not pay me, answered the boy, but just as your grace passed through the forest and we were left alone, he tied me back to the same oak tree and gave me so many lashes again. Indeed, he stopped me such that until now I have been curing myself in a hospital from the evil that the evil villain then did to me. All of which is your fault, because if he went his way and did not come where he was not called, nor interfere in other people's business, my master would content himself with giving me 1 or 2 lashes, and then he would let me go and pay what he owed me. The damage was, said Don Quixote, in my leaving there, that I was not going to leave until I paid you. But you remember, Andres, that I swore that if he didn't pay you, that I would go looking for him, and that I would find him, even if he hid in the belly of the whale. That's the truth, Andres said, but he didn't take any advantage of it. Now you will see if it takes advantage, said Don Quixote. And saying this, he got up very quickly and ordered Sancho to restrain Rocinante. Dorotea asked her what she wanted to do. He replied that she wanted to go look for the villain and punish him for such a bad term, and make Andres pay up to the last maravedi, despite how many villains there were in the world. To which she replied that she should warn that she could not, according to her promised gift, meddle in any enterprise until hers was finished. That's true, responded Don Quixote, and Andres must have patience until he returns, as you say, lady. I don't believe those oaths, said Andres. I would like to have more now with which to get to Seville than all the revenge in the world. Give me, if you have there, something to eat and take, and may the mercy of him and all the knights errant remain with God. He took out of his spare part Sancho a piece of bread and another piece of cheese, and gave it to the waiter. Andres took hold of his bread and cheese, and seeing that no one gave him anything else, he lowered his head and took the road in his hands, as they say. It is true that, as he parted, he said to Don Quixote, For the love of God, gentleman errant knight, if you find me again, even if you see that they are tearing me to pieces, do not help me, but leave me to my misfortune, that it will not be so many, that it will not be greater than the one that will come to me from your help from your grace, whom God curses, and all those knights errant that have been born in the world. Don Quixote was about to get up to punish him, but he began to run so that no one dared to follow him. Don Quixote was very upset about the story of Andres, and it was necessary for the others to take great care not to laugh, for he did not finish running at all. Chapter XXXII, which deals with what happened at the sale to the entire crew of Don Quixote. They came another day for sale. Horror and astonishment of Sancho Panza, and, although he wanted not to enter her, he could not run away. The landlady, their daughter, and Maritornes, who saw Don Quixote and Sancho coming, came out to greet them with signs of great joy, and he received them with grave restraint and applause, and told them to prepare another better bed for him than the one he once had. Pass. Look, brother, the priest said again, there was no Felix Mart of Hyrcania, nor Don Cirongilio of Thrace, nor other similar knights that the books of chivalry tell, because everything is composure and the fiction of idle wits, which they composed them for the effect that you say of entertaining time, as your reapers entertain it by reading them, because I really swear to you that such knights never were in the world, nor such deeds or nonsense occurred in it. To another dog with that bone. It's good that you want me to understand that everything these good books say is nonsense and lies, being printed with the license of the gentlemen of the Royal Council, as if they were people who had to let so many lies be printed together, and so many battles and so many enchantments that take away the judgment. In the middle of this talk Sancho was present, and he was very confused and thoughtful of what he had heard, that knights errant were not used now, and that all books of chivalry were nonsense and lies, and he proposed in his heart to wait in what stopped that trip of his master, and that if he did not leave with the happiness that he thought, he determined to leave him and return with his wife and children to their usual work. Chapter XXXIII. Where the novel of Curious Impertinent is told. In Florence, a rich and famous city of Italy, in the province called Tuscany, lived Anselmo and Lothair, two rich and important gentlemen. They were single, boys of the same age and of the same customs. Anselmo was lost in love with a leading and beautiful maiden of the same city. He begged his parents for a wife, and so she executed him. And Camilla, so happy to have reached Anselmo as her husband, that she did not stop giving thanks to heaven. But, once the weddings were over and the frequency of the visits and congratulations calmed down, Lothario began to carefully neglect going to Anselmo's house, since it seemed to him that the houses of the married friends of the family should not be visited or continued. Same way as when they were single, because, although good and true friendship cannot and should not be suspect in anything, with all this, the honor of the married person is so delicate, that it seems that even the same brothers can be offended, even more so by friends. Anselmo noticed Lothario's referral, and made great complaints about him, telling him that if he knew that getting married had to be part of not communicating with him as he used to, that he would never have done it. And so, he begged him, if it was lawful for such a term to be used between them, that he return to be master of his house, and to enter and leave it as before, assuring him that his wife Camilla had no other taste or will than he wanted her to have. To all these and many other reasons that Anselmo told Lothario to persuade her to return home as usual, Lothario responded with such prudence, discretion, and warning, that Anselmo was satisfied with his friend's good intentions, and they agreed that 2 days in the week and on holidays Lothario went to eat with him. He used to say, and he said well, that the married man to whom heaven had granted a beautiful woman, had to be as careful which friends he brought to his house as in looking with which friends his wife talked to, things that not all times have to be denied by men. Husbands to their wives, is arranged and facilitated at the home of the friend or relative with whom one has the most satisfaction. Lothario also said that married couples needed to have each one of them a friend who would warn him of the negligence that he made in his behavior, because it usually happens that with the great love that the husband has for his wife, he either does not warn him or does not tell him. He says, not to get angry, to do or not do some things, that he does them or not. So, in complaints from one and apologies from the other, they spent many moments and parts of the day. It happened, then, that one of the two of them was walking through a meadow outside the city, and Anselmo told Lothair the same reasons, parents like mine were, and by giving me, not with a scant hand, the goods, both those that are called of nature and those of fortune. Well, with all these parts, which are usually the whole with which men usually and can live content, I live the most spiteful and the most unsavory man in the entire world universe, and I blame myself and scold myself, and I try to shut it up and cover it up with my own thoughts, and so it has been possible for me to come out with the secret as if the industry were trying to tell everyone. I want it to be in the archive of your secret, confident that, with it and with the diligence that you will put, as my true friend, in remedying me, I will soon be free from the anguish that it causes me, and my joy will come for your request to the degree that my discontent has come for my madness. And with that confidence I let you know, friend Lothario, that the desire that tires me is to think if Camilla, my wife, is as good and as perfect as I think, and I cannot find out about this truth, if not by testing it in such a way that the test reveals the carats of its goodness, as fire shows those of gold. Because I have for myself, O friend, that she is not a better woman than she is or is not requested, and that she alone is strong that does not bend to promises, gifts, tears and continuous importunities of solicitous lovers. So, for these reasons and for many others that I could tell you to prove and strengthen the opinion I have, I hope that Camilla, my wife, goes through these difficulties and is crucified and tested in the fire of being required and requested, and of those who have the courage to put their desires in it, and if she comes out of it, as I think she will come out, with the palm of this battle, I will have my fortune without equal. I want, O Lothario friend, that you prepare to be the instrument that carves out this work of my pleasure, that I will give you a place to do it, without missing everything that I see as necessary to request an honest, honorable, collected, and disinterested woman. And it moves me, among other things, to trust you in this arduous undertaking, to see that if Camilla is defeated by you, the victory will not come at all cost and rigor, but only to take for granted what has to be done. Do, out of good respect, and thus, I will not be offended more than with desire, and my injury will be hidden in the virtue of your silence. I cannot persuade myself, O friend Anselmo, that the things you have told me are not jokes. No doubt I imagine, either that you don't know me, or that I don't know you. But not, I know very well that you are Anselmo, and you know that I am Lothario. The damage is that I think you are not the Anselmo you used to be, and you must have thought that I am not the Lothario I should have been either, because the things you have told me are neither those of that Anselmo my friend, nor those that you ask me they have to ask that Lothair you know, because good friends have to test their friends and use them. That he meant that they were not to use his friendship in things that were against God. Well, if a Gentile felt this about friendship, how much better is it for a Christian to feel it, since he knows that for no human reason he will lose divine friendship? By the way, before, you ask me, as I understand it, to seek and request to take away your honor and life, and take it from me together. Because if I have to try to take away your honor, it is clear that I will take your life, because a man without honor is worse than a dead person, and since I am the instrument, as you want me to be, of so much of your evil, am I not going to be dishonored and, consequently, lifeless? It seems to me, O Anselmo, that you now have the ingenuity that the Moors always have, to whom the error of their sect cannot be made to understand with the annotations of Holy Scripture, nor with reasons that they consist of speculation of the understanding, nor that they are founded on articles of faith, but they must bring palpable, easy, intelligible, demonstrative, indubitable examples, with mathematical demonstrations that cannot be denied. And this same term and mode will suit me to use with you, because the desire that was born in you is so misguided and so far from everything that has a shadow of reason, that it seems to me that it must be wasted time that I spend in making you understand your simplicity, that for now I don't want to give it another name, and I'm still about to leave you in your folly, in pain of your bad desire, but it does not allow me to use the friendship that I have for you, which does not allow me to put you in such clear danger of losing you. And, because of course you see it, tell me, Anselmo, haven't you told me that I have to request a withdrawal, persuade an honest one, offer a disinterested one, serve a prudent one? Yes, you have told me. Well, if you know that you have a retired, honest, selfless, and prudent woman, what are you looking for? And if you think that out of all my assaults she will come out the winner, as she will without a doubt, what better titles do you plan to give her later than the ones she now has, or what will she be more after than she is now? Either you don't have it for what you say, or you don't know what you're asking for. If you don't have it because of what you say, why do you want to try it? If not, as a bad thing, do with it what most pleases you. But if she is as good as you think, it will be an impertinent thing to experience the same truth, because, after it is done, she will have to remain with the esteem that she first had. But the one you say you want to try and put into action, nor will it bring you the glory of God, the goods of fortune, or fame with men, because, since you go out with her as you wish, you will not be more proud, nor richer, nor more honored than you are now, and if you don't go out, you have to see yourself in the greatest misery that can be imagined. So, you will not excuse your pain with a secret, before, you will have to cry continuously, if not tears from the eyes, tears of blood from the heart. Tell me, Anselmo, if heaven, or good luck, had made you lord and legitimate owner of a very fine diamond, whose goodness and carats would be satisfied as many lapidaries who saw it, and that all with one voice and in common opinion said that it arrived in carats, goodness, and fineness to which the nature of such a stone could be extended, and you yourself believed so, without knowing anything else to the contrary, would it be fair that I should come to you in desire to take that diamond, and place it between an anvil and a hammer, and there, with the sheer force of blows and arms, test whether it is as hard and as fine as they say? And more, if you put it to work, that, given the case that the stone resisted such a foolish test, it would not be added more value or more fame for that, and if it were to break, which it might be, would not all be lost? Yes, by the way, leaving its owner in the estimation that everyone takes him for simple. Well, consider, Anselmo my friend, that Camilla is a fine diamond, both in your estimation and in that of others, and that it is no reason to put her in contingency for her to break, because, even if she retains her integrity, she cannot rise to a higher value. The one you now have, and if it fails and does not resist, consider from now on which one you would be left without, and with what reason you could complain of yourself, for having been the cause of her perdition and yours. See that there is no jewel in the world that is worth as much as the chaste and honest woman, and that all the honor of women consists in the good opinion that they have, and, since your wife's is such that she reaches the extreme of goodness that you know, Why do you want to question this truth? Look, friend, that the woman is an imperfect animal, and that you should not put embarrassments where she stumbles and falls, but take them away and clear the path of any inconvenience, so that without hesitation she runs lightly to reach the perfection that she lacks, that it consists in being virtuous. She is made of glass, the woman, but it is not necessary to prove whether or not it can be broken, because everything could be. And it is easier to break, and it is not sanity to put yourself in danger of breaking what cannot be welded. And in this opinion they are all, and on reason I found it, that if there are Danaes in the world, there are showers of gold too. You have me for a friend and you want to take away my honor, which is against all friendship, and yet not only do you claim this, but you try to get me to take it from you. That you want to take her away from me is clear. Well, when Camilla sees that I request her, as you ask me, it is certain that she must consider me a man without honor and frowned upon, because I try and do something so out of line with what being who I am and your friendship obliges me. There is no doubt that you want me to take her away from you, because Camilla seeing that I request her, she must think that I have seen in her some lightness that gave me the audacity to reveal my bad desire to her, and, considering her dishonorable, she falls to you, as her thing, the same dishonor of hers. And from here comes what is commonly talked about, that the husband of the adulterous woman, since he does not know it or has given occasion so that his wife is not the one she should be, nor has it been in his hands, nor in his carelessness and little modesty hinder his misfortune, however, they call him and name him with a name of reproach and low, and in a certain way they look at him, those who know his wife's wickedness, with eyes of contempt, instead of looking at him with those of pity. Seeing that not because of his fault, but because of the pleasure of his bad companion, he is in that misfortune. When God raised our first father in the earthly paradise, the divine scripture says that God instilled sleep in Adam, and that, while he was sleeping, he removed a rib from the sinister side, from which he formed our mother Eve, and, as Adam awoke and looked at her, he said, "This is flesh of my flesh and bone of my bones." And God said, "For this a man will leave his father and mother, and they will be two in one flesh." And then the divine sacrament of marriage was instituted, with such bonds that only death can untie them. And this miraculous sacrament has so much strength and virtue that it makes two different people be the same flesh, and it does even more in good married people, who, although they have two souls, do not have more than one will. And from here it comes that, as the flesh of the wife is the same as that of the husband, the stains that fall on her, or the defects that are caused, result in the husband's flesh, although he has not given, as has been said, occasion for that damage. Warn that what you venture to win is little, and that what you will lose will be so much that I will leave it at its point, because I lack words to make it more expensive. But if everything I have said is not enough to move you from your evil purpose, you can well find another instrument of your dishonor and misfortune, which I do not intend to be, even if for that I lose your friendship, which is the greatest loss that I can imagine. With the attention that you have seen, I have listened, Lothario my friend, to what you have wanted to tell me, and in your reasons, examples, and comparisons I have seen the great discretion that you have and the extreme of true friendship that you reach, and likewise I see and confess that if I do not follow your opinion and go after mine, I am fleeing from good and running after evil. Propose this, you have to consider that I now suffer from the disease that some women usually have, that they feel like eating dirt, plaster, coal, and other worse things, even disgusting to look at, much less to eat, so, it is necessary to use some artifice for me to heal, and this could be done easily, only if you start, albeit lukewarmly and faintly, to request Camilla, who should not be so tender that at the first encounters give his honesty to the ground, and with this principle alone I will be satisfied and you will have fulfilled what you owe to our friendship, not only giving me life, but also persuading me not to see myself without honor. And you are required to do this for one reason only, and it is that, being I, as I am, determined to discuss this test, you do not have to consent that I give an account of my folly to another person, with which I would risk the honor that you try not to lose, and, when yours is not at the point that it should in Camilla's intention as long as you request it, it matters little or nothing, because shortly, seeing in her the integrity that we expect, you will be able to tell her the pure truth of our artifice, with which your credit will return to being first. Seeing Anselmo's resolute will, Lothario, and not knowing what more examples to bring him or what more reasons to show him so that he should not follow it, and seeing that he threatened him that he would give an account of his evil desire to another, in order to avoid greater evil, determined to satisfy him, and do what he asked, with the purpose and intention of guiding that business in such a way that, without altering Camilla's thoughts, Anselmo would be satisfied. And they agreed between the two that from another following day the work would begin, and likewise he would give her money and jewels to give her and to offer her. He advised her to give him music, to write verses in praise of him, and that, when he did not want to take the trouble to make them, he would do them himself. They finished eating, they lifted the tablecloths and Anselmo told Lothario that he should stay there with Camilla, while he went to some forced business, that he would be back in an hour and a half. Camilla begged her not to go and Lothario offered to keep her company. But what he did was put his elbow on the arm of the chair and his open hand on his cheek, and, asking Camilla to forgive him for being rude, he said that he wanted to rest a bit while Anselmo came back. Camilla replied that it would be better to rest on the dais than in the chair, and so, she begged her to go and sleep on it. Lothario didn't want to, and there he fell asleep until Anselmo returned. Lothario replied that it had not seemed right to him that the first time he should reveal himself completely, and so, he had done nothing but praise Camilla for being beautiful. All this pleased Anselmo very much, and he said that every day he would give the same place. It happened, then, that many days went by that, without saying a word to Camilla, Lothario answered Anselmo that he spoke her and could never get a small sign of coming from her in anything that was bad, nor even give a sign of the shadow of hope. Before her, she said that she threatened him that if she didn't get rid of that bad thought, that she would tell her husband. It is well, said Anselmo. Up to this point, Camilla has resisted words. It is necessary to see how she resists her works. I will give you 2,000 gold crowns tomorrow so that you can offer them to her, and even give them to her, and another so many so that you can buy jewels with which to feed her, and if she resists this temptation, I will be satisfied and will not give you more sorrow. Another day he received the 4,000 escudos, determined to tell her that Camilla was as full of gifts and promises as she was of words, and that there was no reason to get tired any more, because she spent all her time in vain. But fate, that things were guiding things differently, ordered that Anselmo, having left Lothario and Camilla alone, as he used to do on other occasions, locked himself in a room and through the holes in the keyhole he watched and listened to what they heard. Two were trying, and he saw that in more than half an hour Lothario didn't speak a word to Camilla. He wouldn't even talk about her if he was there for a century, and he realized that everything his friend had told him about Camilla's answers was all fiction and a lie. And, to see if this was so, he left the room and, calling Lothario aside, he asked him what news there was and what mood Camilla was in. Lothario replied that he was not thinking of giving her a stitch in that business anymore, because she responded so harshly and rudely that he would not have the courage to say anything to her again. Ah! Said Anselmo, Lothario, and how badly you correspond to what you owe me and how much I trust you. Now I've been looking at you through the place that grants the entrance of this key, and I've seen that you haven't said a word to Camilla. He swore to Anselmo that from that moment on he would take charge of the content and not lie, as he would see if he spied on him with curiosity, what's more, that it would not be necessary to use any diligence, because the one he intended to satisfy her would remove all suspicion. Anselmo believed him, and in order to give him safer comfort and less shock, he decided to leave his house for 8 days, going to that of a friend of his, who was in a village, not far from the city. Wretched and ill-advised you, Anselmo. What are you doing? What are you drawing? What do you command? Look what you do against yourself, plotting your dishonor and ordering your doom. Your wife Camilla is good, quietly and peacefully you possess her, nobody disturbs your taste, her thoughts do not leave the walls of her house, you are her heaven on earth. Why do you want to delve into the earth and look for new veins of new and never seen treasure, putting yourself in danger that it all comes crashing down, because, in the end, it is supported by the weak supports of its skinny nature? See that the one who seeks the impossible is just that the possible be denied, as a poet said it best, saying, I seek life in death, health in illness, in prison freedom, in the closed exit and in the traitor loyalty. But my luck, from whom I never expect any good, with heaven has decreed that, since I ask for the impossible, they still do not give me the possible. Anselmo went to the village another day, leaving Camilla told that while he was away Lothario would come to look around her house and eat with her, that he be careful to treat him as her own person. Camilla, as a discreet and honest woman, was distressed by the order that her husband left her, and told him to warn him that it was not right for anyone, he absent, to occupy the chair at her table, and that if he did so because he did not trust her he would know how to govern his house, which he would try for that time, and he would see from experience that it was enough for more care. Anselmo replied that that was his pleasure, and that he had only to lower his head and obey him. Camilla said that she would do it that way, albeit against her will. Anselmo left, and another day he came to Lothario's house, where he was received by Camilla with loving and honest welcome, she who never put herself in part where Lothario saw her alone, because she was always surrounded by her servants and maids. In the first 3 days Lothario never said anything to her, even though she could. But the benefit that Camilla's many virtues did, putting silence in Lothario's tongue, redounded more to the harm of both, because if the tongue was silent, the thought ran and had a place to contemplate, part by part, all the extremities of goodness and beauty that Camilla had, enough to make a marble statue fall in love, not that a heart of meat. She looked at her Lothario in the place and space that was to speak to her, and he considered how worthy she was to be loved, and this consideration began little by little to assault the respect that Anselmo had for Anselmo, and 1,000 times she wanted to leave the city and go where Anselmo would never see him, nor would he see Camilla. He would force himself and he fought with himself to reject and not feel the happiness that he brought to look at Camilla. He blamed himself alone for his folly, calling himself a bad friend and even a bad Christian. Indeed, Camilla's beauty and kindness, together with the chance her ignorant husband had placed in her hands, struck Lothario's loyalty on land. And, without looking at anything other than that to which his taste inclined him, after 3 days of Anselmo's absence, in which he was in a continuous battle to resist his desires, he began to break Camilla, with so much embarrassment and with such loving reasons that Camilla was left in suspense, and did nothing but get up from where she was and go into her room, without answering a word. And, it seeming to him that it would be neither a safe nor a well-done thing to give him the opportunity or the place to speak it again, he determined to send that very night, as he did, to Anselmo, a servant of his with a ticket, where he wrote these reasons to him. Chapter 30. Where the novel of the curious impertinent continues. Just as it is often said that the army looks bad without its general and the castle without its castellan, I say that a married woman and a girl look worse without her husband, when very just occasions do not prevent it. I feel so bad without you, and so helpless not to be able to suffer this absence, that if you don't come soon, I'll have to go entertain myself at my parents' house, even if I leave yours unguarded, because the one that you left me, if it is that it was left with such a title, I think that it looks more for her taste than for what you have to do, and, since you are discreet, I have nothing more to say to you, nor is it even good that I say more to you. Anselmo received this letter, and he understood from it that Lothario had already begun the enterprise, and that Camilla must have responded as he wished, and, overjoyed at such news, he responded to Camilla, verbally, that he should not move his house in any way, because he would be back very soon. In short, she decided on what was worst for her, which was to stay, with the determination not to flee from Lothario's presence, with which she intended to resist, keeping silent, to everything that Lothario wanted to say to her. Finally, it seemed to him that it was necessary, in the space and place afforded by Anselmo's absence, to tighten the siege of that fortress. And so, he attacked his presumption with the praises of his beauty, because there is nothing that more quickly renders and flattens the castellated towers of the vanity of the beautiful than vanity itself, put on the tongues of flattery. He cried, begged, offered, flattered, insisted, and Lothario pretended with so many feelings, with so many signs of truth, that he came across Camilla's modesty and came to triumph over what was least expected and most desired. Camilla gave up, but, how much, if Lothario's friendship did not stand? A clear example that shows us that loving passion is only overcome with via, and that no one has to throw himself into arms with such a powerful enemy, because divine forces are necessary to overcome their human ones. Only Leonla knew of her lady's weakness, because her 2 bad friends and new lovers couldn't hide it from her. Lothario did not want to tell Camilla about Anselmo's claim, nor that he had given him room to reach that point, because he did not disregard her love and thought that thus, perhaps, and without thinking, and not on purpose, he had required. Anselmo returned from there a few days to her house, and he did not notice what was missing in it, which was what he had least and most esteemed. He then went to see Lothair, and found him in his house. The 2 embraced each other, and one asked about the news of his life or his death. The news that I can give you, O friend Anselmo. Lothario said, they are that you have a woman who can worthily be an example and crown of all good women. The words that I have said to him have been carried away by the air, the offers have been taken in little, the gifts have not been accepted, some feigned tears of mine have been made notable mockery. In short, just as Camilla is the figure of all beauty, it is a file where honesty is present and moderation and modesty live. Be content, Anselmo, and don't want to make any more tests than have been done. Anselmo was very happy with Lothario's reasons, and he believed them as if they were said by some oracle. But, with all that, he begged her not to leave the company, even if he was only out of curiosity and entertainment, even if he did not take advantage of such hurried errands as before, and that he only wanted me to write some verses in praise of him, under the name of Chloe, because he would make Camilla understand that he was in love with a lady. That won't be necessary, said Lothario, because the muses aren't such enemies to me that they don't visit me at certain times of the year. Tell Camilla what you have said about the pretense of my love, that I will write the verses, if not as good as the subject deserves, they will be, at least, the best that I could. The impertinent and the treacherous friend agreed, and when Anselmo returned to her house, he asked Camilla what she was already amazed that she hadn't asked him, which was that she tell him the occasion why she had written the paper she sent him. Camilla replied that she had thought that Lothario looked at her a little more casually than she did when he was at home, but that she was already disillusioned and believed that it had been her imagination, because Lothario was already running away from her and from being alone with her. Anselmo told her that she could well be sure of that suspicion, because he knew that Lothario was in love with a leading maiden of the city, whom he celebrated under the name of Chloe, and that, even if he wasn't, there was no need to fear her. Truth of Lothario and of the great friendship of both. Another day, while the 3 of them were sitting at the table, Anselmo begged Lothair to say something that he had composed to his beloved Clory. Even if I knew her, replied Lothario, I wouldn't hide anything, because when some lover praises a lady as beautiful and the note as cruel, no disgrace does her good credit. But, whatever it may be, what I know how to say, that yesterday I wrote a sonnet to the ingratitude of this Clory, which she says thus. Camilla thought the sonnet was fine, but Anselmo liked it better, because he praised her and said that she was too cruel, the lady who did not correspond to such clear truths. To which Camilla said, so, everything that poets in love say is true. As poets, they don't say it, replied Lothario, but, as soon as they are in love, they are always as short as true. There's no doubt about that, replied Anselmo, all to support and credit Lothario's thoughts with Camilla, as careless of Anselmo's artifice as she was already in love with Lothario. And so, with the pleasure that he had of her things, and more, having understood that his wishes and writings were directed to her, and that she was the true Clory, she begged him that if he knew another sonnet or other verses, he would tell them. Yes, I know, answered Lothario. Anselmo also praised the second sonnet, as he had done the first, and in this way he was adding link by link to the chain with which his dishonor was linked and locked, because the more Lothario dishonored him, then he told him that he was more honored, and, with this, all the steps that Camilla descended towards the center of her contempt, she climbed, in the opinion of her husband, towards the summit of her virtue and good fame. It happened in this that, finding one time, among others, Camilla alone with her maid, she said to her, I'm mad, friend Leonla, to see how little I've known how to estimate myself, because I didn't even make Lothario buy the house over time. Entire possession that I gave him so quickly of my will. I fear that he will estimate my speed or lightness, without realizing the strength that he made me not to be able to resist him. Don't be embarrassed by that, my lady, replied Leonla, for it is not the mount, nor is it a cause to diminish the esteem, to give what is given quickly, if, in fact, what is given is good, and it itself worthy of esteem. And it is even said that he who then gives, gives twice. It is also often said, Camilla said, that what costs little is valued less. That reason does not apply to you, answered Leonla, because love, as I have heard it said, sometimes flies and sometimes walks, with this one it runs and with that one it goes slowly, it warms some and burns others, it hurts some and others. He kills, at the same point he begins the race of his desires and at that same point he finishes it and concludes, in the morning he usually puts a siege on a fortress and at night he has it surrendered, because there is no force that can resist him. And, being so, what are you frightened of, or what do you fear, if the same thing must have happened to Lothario, having taken love as an instrument to surrender the absence of my lord? And it was necessary for her to conclude what love had determined, without giving time for Anselmo to return to her, and with her presence her work would remain imperfect. Because love has no other better minister to carry out what it wants, which is the occasion, it uses the occasion in all its actions, mainly in its principles. I know all this very well, more from experience than hearsay, and one day I will tell you, madam, that I too am young flesh and blood. How much more, Mrs. Camilla, that you did not give yourself or gave so soon, that first you would not have seen in the eyes, in the sighs, in the reasons and in the promises and gifts of Lothario all his soul, seeing in her and in her virtues how worthy Lothario was to be loved. But make sure that Lothario esteems you as you esteem him, and live with happiness and satisfaction that, since you fell into the bond of love, he is the one who squeezes you with value and esteem. And so she confessed, discovering to Camilla how she was having love affairs with a well-born young man from the same city, which Camilla was disturbed, fearing that it was that way where her honor could be at risk. Camilla could do nothing but beg Leonla not to say anything about her deed to the one who claimed to be her lover, and to treat her things with secrecy. Because they did not come to the news of Anselmo or Lothair. Leonla replied that she would do so, but she complied in such a way that Camilla's fear that she would lose her credit was true. Because the dishonest and daring Leonla, after she saw that her mistress's behavior was not what she used to, dared to enter and put her lover inside the house, confident that, even if her mistress saw him, she would not dare to discover him, that this damage is caused, among others, by the sins of the ladies, that they become slaves of their own servants and are forced to cover up their dishonesty and vileness, as happened with Camilla, that, although she saw once and many times that her Leonla was with her gallant in a room of her house, not only did she not dare to scold her, but she gave her room to lock him up, and removed all the hindrances, so that he would not be seen from her husband. But she couldn't remove them that Lothario didn't see him come out of it once, at the break of dawn, which, without knowing who he was, first thought that it must be some ghost, but, when he saw him walk, cloak himself and cover himself with care and modesty, he fell from the simple thought of him and gave into another, which would be the perdition of all if Camilla did not remedy it. Lothario thought that the man he had seen leaving Anselmo's house so late had not entered it because of Leonla, nor did he even remember if Leonla was in her world, he only believed that Camilla, in the same way that she had been easy and light with him, was for someone else. That these additions bring with them the wickedness of the bad woman, that she loses the credit of her honor with the same one to whom she gave herself, begged and persuaded, and believes that she gives herself more easily to others, and gives infallible credit to anyone who suspects that of this come to him. And it seems that Lothair lacked all his good understanding on this point, and all his warned speeches disappeared from his memory, since, without making any that was good, or even reasonable, without more, before Anselmo got up, impatient and blind with the jealous rage that gnawed at his insides, dying to take revenge on Camilla, who had not offended him in any way, he went to Anselmo and said, "Know, Anselmo, that for many days I have been fighting with myself, forcing myself not to tell you what is no longer possible or just to cover up for you any more. You know that Camilla's strength is already surrendered and subject to everything that I want to do with her, and if I have been slow to discover this truth to you, it has been to see if it was some slight whim of hers, or if I was doing it to test myself and see if the loves that, with your license, with her, were treated with firm purpose. And I do not want you to run hastily to do some revenge, because the sin is not yet committed but with thought. Pretend that you are absent for 2 or 3 days, as you usually do, and do it in such a way that you stay hidden in your bedroom, because the tapestries that are there and other things that you can cover yourself with offer you a lot of comfort, and then you will see for yourself, your own eyes, and I through mine, what Camilla wants, and if it is the evil that can be feared rather than expected, with silence, sagacity and discretion you can be the executioner of your offense." Anselmo was absorbed, astonished and amazed at Lothario's reasons, because they caught him in time where he least expected to hear them, because he already had Camilla as the winner of Lothario's feigned assaults and was beginning to enjoy the glory of victory. "You have done it, Lothario, as I expected from your friendship. In everything I have to follow your advice, do what you want and keep that secret that you see is convenient in such unexpected cases." Lothario promised him, and, as he left him, he totally regretted what he had told him, seeing how foolishly he had walked, because he could take revenge on Camilla, and not by such a cruel and dishonorable path. In the end, he agreed to account for everything to Camilla, and, as there was no shortage of places to do it, that same day he found her alone, and she, just as he saw that she could speak to him, told her, "No, friend Lothario, that I have a sorrow in my heart that squeezes me so that it seems that it wants to burst in my chest, and it must be a wonder if it doesn't, because Leonla's shamelessness has reached such a point that every night she locks up a gallant of hers in this house and she stays with him until the day, as much at the expense of my credit as there will be an open field to judge whoever sees him leave my house at such unusual hours. And what tires me is that I cannot punish or scold her, that her being the secretary of our dealings has put a brake on my mouth to silence hers, and I fear that some bad event will arise from here." At first when Camilla said this, Lothario thought it was an artifice to disprove that the man she had seen leaving was Leonla's, and not hers, but, seeing her cry and grieve over her, and ask for her remedy, he came to believe her truth, and, believing it, he ended up being confused and completely repentant. But, with all this, he told Camilla not to be embarrassed, that he would order medicine to stop Leonla's insolence. He also told her what, instigated by the furious rage of her jealousy, he had said to Anselmo, and how he had arranged to hide in the bedroom, to see from there clearly how little loyalty she had to him. He asked her forgiveness for this madness, and her advice to be able to remedy it and get out of such a messy labyrinth as her bad speech had put him. Camilla was shocked to hear what Lothario was saying to her, and with great anger and many discreet reasons she scolded her and disfigured her bad thinking and the simple and bad determination she had had. Then instantly Camilla found a way to remedy such an apparently irremediable business, and told Lothario to try to get Anselmo to hide another day where he said, because she planned to make his hiding comfort so that from then on the two could enjoy themselves without frightsome, and, without fully declaring her thoughts, he warned her to be careful that, while Anselmo was hiding, he would come when Leonla called him, and that he should respond to whatever she told him as he did, even if he did not know that Anselmo was listening. She insisted that Lothario just declare her intention to her, because with more certainty and notice she would keep everything that she saw to be necessary. With this, Lothair left, and Anselmo, another day, with the excuse of going to that village of his friend, left and hid again. Hidden, then, Anselmo. Certain Camilla and Leonla were sure that Anselmo was hiding, they entered the bedroom, and as soon as Camilla had set foot on it, when, giving a great sigh, she said, "I, Leonla, friend of hers. Wouldn't it be better that, before I put into execution what I don't want you to know, because you don't try to hinder it, that you take Anselmo's dagger, which I have asked you for, and spend with it this infamous chest of mine? But do not do such, that it will not be a reason for me to bear the penalty of someone else's fault. First I want to know what Lothario's daring and dishonest eyes saw in me that would cause him to dare reveal such an evil desire as the one that has discovered me, to the contempt of his friend and to my dishonor. Go to that window, Leonla, and call him, for, without a doubt, he must be in the street, waiting to put his bad intentions into effect. But first she will be cruel as well as honest. "I, my lady," answered the sagacious and warned Leonla, "and what do you want to do with this dagger? Do you want to take your own life or take it from Lothario? That any of these things you want must result in loss of your credit and fame. It is better that you hide your grievance, and do not allow this evil man to enter this house now and find us alone. Look, lady, we are skinny women, and he is a man and determined, and, since he comes with that evil purpose, blind and passionate, perhaps before you put yours into execution, he will do what would be worse than taking your life. Too bad my lord Anselmo, who has wanted so badly to give this face skinner 394 in his house. And already, lady, kill him, as I think you want to do. What should we do with him after he's dead?" "What friend?" Camilla responded, "We'll leave him to Anselmo to bury him, since it will be fair that he rests on the work he'll take on putting his own infamy under the ground." Anselmo listened to all this, and with each word that Camilla said, his thoughts changed, but when he understood that she was determined to kill Lothario, she wanted to go out and discover herself, so that such a thing would not be done, but he was stopped by the desire to see what was the end of so much gallantry and honest resolution, in order to get out in time to get in the way. At this Camilla took a strong feint, and, throwing herself on a bed that was there, Leonla began to cry very bitterly. It didn't take long for Camilla to return from her fainting, and she, coming to herself, said, "Why don't you go, Leonla, to call the most loyal friend of a friend who saw the sun or covered the night?" "I'm going to call him, my lady," said Leonla, "but you have to give me that dagger first, because you don't do anything, while I'm missing, that you leave all those who love you well to cry with it all their lives." "Go safe, friend Leonla, I won't do it," answered Camilla. "I will die, if I die, but it must be avenged and satisfied by the one who has given me the opportunity to come to this place to mourn her daring, born so without my fault." While she was coming back, Camilla was left saying, as if she were talking to herself, "God help me. Wouldn't it be more correct to have fired Lothario, as I have done many other times, than not to put him in a condition, as I have already put him, that he considers me dishonest and bad, even this time it will take me to undeceive him? Better outside, no doubt, but I would not be avenged, nor would my husband's honor be satisfied, if he were to come out again with such clean hands and such a smooth step from where his bad thoughts entered him. Let the traitor pay with his life for what he attempted with such a lewd desire. Let the world know, if it were ever to find out, that Camilla not only kept her loyalty to her husband, but also gave her revenge on the one who dared to offend her. But why am I making these speeches now? Has, perchance, a gallant resolution need any advice? No, by the way. Away, then, traitors, here, revenge. Among the false, come, arrive, die and finish, and whatever happens happens." And, saying this, he paced about the room with his dagger drawn, taking such bewildered and wild steps, and making such gestures, that it seemed that he was insane, and that he was not a delicate woman, but a desperate ruffian. Anselmo looked at everything, covered behind some rugs where he had hidden himself, and he was amazed at everything, and it already seemed to him that what he had seen and heard was enough satisfaction for greater suspicions. Leonla returned with Lothario by the hand, and, just as Camilla saw him, making a large line on the ground with her dagger in front of her, she told him, "Lothario, pay attention to what I am telling you. If you dare to cross this line you see, in that same I will spend my chest with this dagger that I have in my hands. First of all, Lothario, I want you to tell me if you know Anselmo, my husband, and what do you think of him, and secondly, I want to know if you know me too. Answer me this, and do not be disturbed, nor think much about what you have to answer, because I am not asking you about difficulties." Lothario was not so ignorant that, from the first point that Camilla told him to make Anselmo hide, he would not have realized what she intended to do, and so, she corresponded with her intention so discreetly, and so on time, that they both made that lie pass for more than a certain truth, and so, he responded to Camilla in this way. "I say that I know your husband Anselmo, and we have known each other since our most tender years, and I don't want to say what you know so well about our friendship, for not making me a witness of the wrong that love causes me to do to him, a powerful excuse for greater mistakes. I know you and I have in the same possession that he has you, that, otherwise, for less garments than yours, I would not have gone against what I must be who I am and against the holy laws of true friendship, now broken and violated by such a powerful enemy as love for me." "If you confess that," answered Camilla, "mortal enemy of everything that justly deserves to be loved, with what face do you dare to appear before someone you know is the mirror where you look at yourself, so that you could see how seldom do you offend him? If not, tell me, when, O traitor, did I respond to your prayers with some word or sign that could awaken in you some shadow of hope of fulfilling your infamous desires? I want to attribute the blame for your impertinence to myself, since, without a doubt, Some carelessness of mine has sustained your care for so long, and so, I want to punish myself and give myself the penalty that your guilt deserves. And, because you saw that, being so inhuman with me, it was not possible to stop being so with you, I wanted to bring you to be a witness of the sacrifice that I plan to make to the offended honor of my honorable husband, offended by you with the greatest care that has been given to you possible, and also from me with the little modesty that I have had to flee the opportunity, if I gave you one, to favor and canonize your bad intentions. I return to say that the suspicion I have that some carelessness of mine engendered in you such wild thoughts is the one that tires me the most, and the one that I most want to punish with my own hands, because, if another executioner punished me, perhaps my guilt would be more public, but, before I do this, I want to kill by dying, and take with me whoever has just satisfied me the desire for revenge that I hope and have, seeing there, wherever I go, the penalty that disinterested justice gives and that does not double to the one who on such desperate terms he has put me. And, saying these reasons, with incredible force and lightness he attacked Lothario with his drawn dagger, with such signs of wanting to plunge it into his chest, that he was almost in doubt whether those demonstrations were false or true, because he was forced to use of his industry and his strength to prevent Camilla from hitting him. Well, luck doesn't want to fully satisfy my so just desire, at least it won't be so powerful that, in part, it takes away from me that it doesn't satisfy you. And, forcing himself to release his hand from the dagger, which Lothario was holding, he pulled it out, and, guiding its point where it might not hurt deeply, he inserted it and hit it above the little island on the left side, next to her shoulder, and then dropped to the ground, as if in a faint. Leonela and Lothario were stunned by such an event, and they still doubted the truth of that fact, seeing Camilla lying on the ground and bathed in her blood. Lothair rushed, terrified and out of breath, to draw the dagger, and when he saw the small wound, he came out of the fear that he had had until then. She began to make a long and sad lamentation over Camilla's body, as if she were deceased, casting many curses, not only on him, but on the one who had been the cause of habily put in that term. Leonela took her in her arms and put her on her bed, begging Lothario to go look for someone who would secretly cure Camilla of her. She considered how aware Anselmo must have been that she had a second Portia for a wife, and she longed to meet him to celebrate both the lie and the most veiled truth she could ever imagine. Leonela took, as has been said, her blood from her mistress, which was no more than enough to prove her lie, and, washing the wound with a little wine, he tied it up as best he could, saying such reasons, while he was treating it, that, even if no others had preceded, it would be enough to make Anselmo believe that he had in Camilla a simulacrum of the honesty. Leonela's words were joined by others from Camilla, calling herself cowardly and of little courage, because she had lacked the time that was most necessary to have him, to take away her life, which she hated so much. She asked her maid's advice whether or not she would give all that success to her dear husband, which told him not to tell her, because it would put him under the obligation to take revenge on Lothario, which could not be done without great risk, and that the good woman was obliged not to give her husband an opportunity to quarrel, but to take away as many as possible. Camilla replied that her opinion seemed very good to her and that she would follow him, but that she, in any case, had better find out what to say to Anselmo about the cause of that wound, which he could not fail to see, to which Leonela replied that she, not even making fun of her, did not know how to lie. Well, sister, Camilla replied, what do I have to know, that I would not dare to forge or sustain a lie, if my life depended on it? I'll think about what we tell him, and perhaps that, since the wound is where it is, you can cover it up without him seeing it. Anselmo had been very attentive to listen and to see the tragedy of the death of her honor reenacted, which with such strange and effective affections the characters of it represented, that it seemed that they had been transformed into the very truth of what they pretended. She longed for the night very much, and to have a place to leave his house, and go to see his good friend Lothario, congratulating him on the precious daisy that he had found in the disappointment of his wife's kindness. Of the two of them were careful to give him space and comfort to go out, and he, without losing her, went out and then went to look for Lothario, who found it is not possible to count well the hugs he gave him, the things that made him happy. He said, the praises he gave Camilla. All of which Lothario listened to without being able to show any signs of joy, because it represented to his memory how deceived his friend was and how unjustly he had wronged him. And, although Anselmo saw that Lothario was not happy, he believed he was the cause for having left Camilla injured and for having been the cause, and so, among other reasons, he told her not to feel sorry for Camilla's incident, because, without a doubt, the wound was light, since they agreed to cover it up from him. And that, according to this, there was nothing to fear, but that from then on he would rejoice and rejoice with him, because by his industry and a half he saw himself raised to the highest happiness that he could rightly desire, and he wanted others not to be his entertainments than in making verses in praise of Camilla, which would make her eternal in the memory of the coming centuries. Lothario praised his good determination and said that he, for his part, would help erect such an illustrious building. With this Anselm was left the most deliciously deceived man that there could be in the world, he himself carried by the hand to his house, believing that he carried the instrument of his glory, all the perdition of his fame. He received Camilla with a face, apparently crooked, although with a smiling soul. This deception lasted a few days, until, after a few months, fortune turned her will and wickedness came out into the plaza with so much artifice covered up there, and Anselmo's impertinent curiosity cost him his life. Chapter XXXV, which deals with the brave and enormous battle that Don Quixote had with some skins of red wine, and the novel of the curious impertinent ends. Little more remained to be read of the novel, when Sancho Panza came out of the mansion where Don Quixote rested, all excited, shouting, "Come, gentlemen, quickly and help my lord, who is involved in the closest and most difficult battle that my eyes have seen. Long live God, who has slashed at the giant enemy of Princess Micomicona, who has chopped off her head, slice by slice, as if he were a turnip. I'll be killed," the innkeeper said at this point, "if Don Quixote, or Don Diablo, hasn't stabbed one of the red wineskins that were full at his bedside, and the spilled wine must be what made him sick. Looks like blood to this good man. And it's a good thing that he didn't have his eyes open, because he was sleeping and dreaming that he was in battle with the giant, that the imagination of the adventure that was going to end was so intense. And he had given so many stabs to the hides, believing that he was giving them to the giant, that the whole room was full of wine, which, seen by the innkeeper, became so angry that he attacked Don Quixote, and with a clenched fist he began to hit him so many times that if Cardenio and the priest did not get rid of him, he would end the giant's war, and, with all that, the poor gentleman did not wake up. Sancho was looking all over the floor for the giant's head, and since he couldn't find it, he said, "I already know that everything in this house is an enchantment, that the other time, in this same place where I am now, they gave me many mojicones and blows, without knowing who gave them to me, and I could never see anyone, and now this head does not seem here, which I saw cut off by my very eyes, and the blood ran from the body as from a fountain." The innkeeper despaired of seeing the squire's phlegm and the lord's curse, and he swore that it would not be like the last time, that they left him without paying, and that now the privileges of his chivalry would not be worth it to stop paying both. The priest was holding hands with Don Quixote, who, believing that the adventure had already ended and that he was in front of the Princess Micomicona, fell on his knees before the priest, saying, "Your greatness, tall and famous lady, to live, today more, certain that this ill-born creature can harm you, and I too, from today more, am removed from the word that I gave you, because, with the help of the high God and with the favor of the one for whom I live and breathe, I have fulfilled it so well." But, in the end, the barber, Cardenio, and the priest did so much that, with no little effort, they found Don Quixote in bed, who fell asleep, showing signs of great fatigue. The priest calmed everything down, promising to satisfy their loss as best he could, both for the hides and for the wine. Calmed everyone, the priest wanted to finish reading the novel, because he saw that there was little left. It happened, then, that, due to Anselmo's satisfaction with Camilla's goodness, he lived a happy and careless life, and Camilla, from industry, made a bad face at Lothario, because Anselmo understood contrary to the will he had for her. In this, the one that Leonla had to see herself qualified, not with her love, got to such a point that, without looking at anything else, she went after him with free rein, trusting that her wife was covering her up. One night Anselmo heard footsteps in Leonla's room, and, wanting to go in to see who was giving them, he felt the door being stopped, which made him more willing to open it, and so forcefully did he, that he opened it, and he went inside just in time that he saw a man jump out the window into the street, and, rushing to catch up with him or meet him, he could not get one or the other, because Leonla embraced him. Anselmo did not want to believe it, before, blind with anger, he took out the dagger and wanted to hurt Leonla, telling her to tell him the truth, if not, he would kill her. She, with fear, without knowing what was being said. "For now it will be impossible," said Leonla, "since I'm so embarrassed, leave me until tomorrow, then you will know about me what you will admire, and he is sure that the one who jumped through this window is a young man from the city, who has given me the hand of being my husband." Anselmo calmed down with this and wanted to wait for the term that was asked of him, because he did not think he would hear anything that was against Camilla. Then he went to see Camilla and to tell her, as he told her, he became so afraid, truly believing, and it was to be believed, that Leonla was going to tell Anselmo everything she knew about his little faith, that he did not have the courage to wait if his suspicion was false or not. And that same night, when it seemed to her that Anselmo was sleeping, she gathered the best jewels she had and some money, and, without feeling sorry for anyone, she left the house and went to Lothario's house, to whom she told what was happening, and told him he asked that she be put in charge, or that the two of them be absent where they could be sure of Anselmo. Anyway, he agreed to take Camilla to a monastery, where one of her sisters was prioress. Camilla consented to it, and he, likewise, later left the city, without informing anyone of his absence. When it dawned, without noticing that Anselmo was missing from his side, Anselmo opened the door and entered the room, but he did not find Leola in it. He only found some sheets tied to the window, an indication and sign that she had hung there and gone. He later returned very sad to tell Camilla, and, not finding her in bed or in her entire house, he was amazed. Perhaps he was right, going to look for Camilla, that he saw her chest open and that most of his jewels were missing, and with this he finally realized his misfortune, and that Leola was not the cause of his misfortune. And, just as he was, without finishing dressing, sad and thoughtful, he went to report his misfortune to his friend Lothario. But when he did not find him, and his servants told him that he had been absent from home that night and had taken with him all the money he had, he thought he would lose his mind. He didn't know what to think, what to say, or what to do, and little by little his senses were coming back. He contemplated and saw himself in an instant without a wife, without a friend, and without servants. He resolved, finally, after a great peace, to go to the village of his friend, where he had been when he caused all that misfortune to be plotted, and scarcely had he gone halfway, when, harassed by thoughts of him, he was forced to dismount and hire his horse to a tree, to the trunk of which he let himself fall, giving tender and painful sighs, and there he remained until almost nightfall. And that hour he saw a man on horseback coming from the city, and, after having greeted him, he asked him what news there was in Florence. The citizen replied, the strangest that many days have been heard in it, because it is publicly said that Lothario, that great friend of Anselmo the rich, who lived in San Juan, took Camilla, Anselmo's wife, tonight, who doesn't seem to either. All this has been said by a servant of Camilla, who last night the governor found her hanging with a sheet from the windows of Anselmo's house. With such unfortunate news, Anselmo almost came to terms, not only losing his mind, but ending his life. He got up as best he could and arrived at the house of his friend, who still did not know of his misfortune. He then asked Anselmo to put him to bed and to give him time to write. Seeing himself, then, alone, he began to burden his imagination so much with his misfortune, that he clearly knew that his life was running out, and so, he ordered to leave news of the cause of his strange death, and, beginning to write, before he had finished putting in everything he wanted, she lost her breath and left her life in the hands of the pain caused by his impertinent curiosity. Seeing the master of the house that it was already late and that Anselmo had not called, he decided to go in to find out if his indisposition was going to pass, and found him lying face down, half of his body on the bed and the other half on the buffet, on the which was with the paper written and open, and he still had the pen in his hand. And finally he read the paper. A foolish and impertinent desire took my life. If the news of my death reached Camilla's ears, know that I forgive her, because she was not obliged to perform miracles, nor did I need to want her to do them, and, since I was the fabricator of my dishonor, there is no reason why. Up to this point Anselmo wrote, where he could see that at that point, without being able to finish his reason, his life ended. Another day his friend notified Anselmo's relatives of his death, who already knew of his misfortune, and the monastery where Camilla was, almost at the end of accompanying her husband on that forced trip, not because of the news of the dead husband, but for those who knew of the absent friend. It is said that, although she saw herself as a widow, she did not want to leave the monastery, much less make her profession as a nun, until, not many days later, news came to her that Lothair had died in a battle that at that time was given by Monsieur de Lautrec to the great Captain Gonzalo Fernandez de Córdoba in the kingdom of Naples, where she had ended up the late repentant friend. Knowing this to Camilla, she made her profession, and she ended her life in a few days at the rigorous hands of sadness and melancholy. This was the end they all had, born of such a foolish beginning. Well, said the priest, this novel seems to me, but I cannot persuade myself that this is true, and if it is faked, the author faked it wrong, because it cannot be imagined that there is a husband so foolish that he wants to make such a costly experience as Anselmo. If this case were put between a gallant and a lady, it could be carried out, but between husband and wife, something is impossible, and, as far as the way of telling him is concerned, I am not dissatisfied. Chapter 30. That deals with other rare events that happened in the sale. While doing this, the innkeeper, who was at the door of the inn, said, this one who comes is a beautiful troop of guests. 4 men come on horseback, with lances and shields, and all with black masks, and along with them comes a woman dressed in white, in an armchair, her face also covered, and 2 other young men on foot. Hearing this, Dorothea covered her face, and Cardenio entered Don Quixote's room. They went to get down the woman who was sitting in the chair, and, one of hers taking her in her arms, he sat her down on a chair that was at the entrance to the room where Cardenio had hidden. Only, when the woman sat down in the chair, he gave a deep sigh and dropped her arms, like a sick and fainted person. Pardies, sir, I won't be able to tell you what kind of people this is, I only know that it shows to be very mean. Because they all walk with such silence that it is marvelous, because nothing can be heard among them other than the sighs and sobs of the poor lady. He turned to where Dorothea was, who, as she had heard the cloaked woman sigh, moved by natural compassion, went over to her and said, "How bad do you feel, my lady? See if it is someone of whom women usually have use and experience to cure him, that on my part I offer you a good will to serve you." The cloaked gentleman arrived, and the young man said that the others obeyed, and said to Dorothea, "Don't get tired, madam, of offering anything to that woman, because she has a habit of not thanking anything that is done for her, nor do you try to get them to tell you anything. Answer, if you do not want to hear some lie from his mouth." "I never said it," she said at this time, she who had been silent up until then. "Before, for being so true and so without traces of lies, I see myself now in so much misfortune, and I want you to be the witness of this, because my pure truth makes you false and a liar." Cardenio heard these reasons very clearly and distinctly, giving a loud voice he said, "God help me! What's this that I'm hearing? What voice is this that has reached my ears?" The lady turned her head at these cries, all startled, and, not seeing who was giving them, she rose to her feet and went to enter the room, which seen by her knight, he stopped her, not letting her move a step. She dropped the taffeta with which she had covered her face, and she discovered an incomparable beauty and a miraculous face, though colorless and amazed. The gentleman had her firmly behind her back, and, being so busy holding her, he could not go to lift her cloak, which was falling off her, as, in fact, it fell off completely, and, raising her eyes Dorothea, who was embracing the lady, saw that the one who was also embracing her was her husband Don Fernando of her, and, as soon as she had known him, when she, throwing out from the depths of her entrails a long and sad eye, she fell backwards in a faint, and, unless the barber was there next to her, who picked her up in her arms, she would hit the ground with her. Then the priest went to take off her shroud, to pour water on her face, and just as he discovered her he met her Don Fernando, who was the one who was embracing the other of hers, and he was left as if dead in see her, but not because he stopped having Luscinda, who was the one who tried to free himself from her arms, which he had known Cardenio in her sigh, and he had known her. Cardenio also heard the woe that Dorothea gave when she fainted, and, believing that she was her Luscinda, she left the room terrified, and the first thing she saw was Don Fernando, who had Luscinda in his arms. Don Fernando also later met Cardenio, and all three of them, Luscinda, Cardenio, and Dorothea, remained silent and suspended, almost without knowing what had happened to them. They were all silent and they all looked at each other, Dorothea at Don Fernando at Cardenio, Cardenio at Luscinda, and Luscinda at Cardenio. But the one who first broke the silence was Luscinda, speaking to Don Fernando in this way, "Leave me alone, Mr. Don Fernando, for what you must be who you are, since for another respect you don't do it. Notice how heaven, by unusual and hidden ways to us, has set my true husband before me." There had in this meantime come to Dorothea, and she had been listening to all the reasons that Luscinda said, why she came to know who she was. She got up and went to kneel at her feet, and, shedding a great number of beautiful and pitiful tears, she began to say to him, "If it is no longer, my lord, that the rays of the sun that you have in your eclipsed arms take away and dim those of your eyes, you will have already missed the mark. See that the one kneeling at your feet is unfortunate, as long as you want, and unfortunate Dorothea. You wanted me to be yours, and you wanted it in such a way that, even if you now want me not to be, it will not be possible for you to stop being mine. You cannot belong to the beautiful Luscinda, because you are mine, nor can she belong to you, because she belongs to Cardenio, and it will be easier for you, if you look into it, to reduce your will to loving the one who adores you, than not directing the one who hates you to love you well. And if you don't love me for who I am, that I am your true and legitimate wife, love me, at least, and admit me as your slave, that, as I am in your power, I will consider myself happy and well fortunate. That true nobility consists in virtue, and if you lack this, denying me what you so justly owe me, I will be left with more noble advantages than you have. In short, sir, what I am telling you lately is that, whether you like it or not, I am your wife, your words are witnesses, which have not and should not be lies. And, when all this is lacking, your own conscience must not fail to speak out silently in the midst of your joys, returning for this truth that I have told you and disturbing your best tastes and happiness." Watching her was Luscinda, no less hurt by her feelings than admired by her great discretion and beauty. Don Fernando opened his arms and, setting Luscinda free, said, "You won, beautiful Dorothea, you won, because it is not possible to have the courage to deny so many truths together." With the fainting Luscinda had, just as Don Fernando had left her, she was going to fall to the ground, but Cardenio finding himself there, who had stood behind Don Fernando's back because he didn't know him, assuming all fear and risking all risks, went to support Luscinda, and, taking her in his arms, said to her, "If the merciful heaven likes and wants you to have some rest, loyal, firm and beautiful my lady, nowhere do I think you will have him safer than in these arms that now receive you, and another time they received you, when fortune wanted it to be call you mine. He threw his arms around his neck, and, joining his face with Cardenio's, he said, Yes, my lord, you are the true owner of this captive of yours, even if the contrary fate prevents it, and even if more threats are made to him. To this life that is sustained in yours. This was a strange spectacle for Don Fernando and for all the bystanders, marveling at such an unseen event. It seemed to Dorotea that Don Fernando had lost the color in his face and that he was making a gesture of wanting to take revenge on Cardenio, and, just as she thought, with unseen alacrity she hugged him by the knees, kissing them and holding him tight, which would not let him move, and, without ceasing a point of her tears, she said to him, What are you planning to do, my only refuge, in this unthinkable trance? You have your wife at your feet, and the one you want to be is in the arms of her husband. While Dorotea was saying this, although Cardenio had Luscinda in his arms, she did not take her eyes off Don Fernando, determined that if she saw him make any move to her detriment, she would try to defend herself against her. But at this time Don Fernando's friends came, and the priest and the barber, who had been present for everything, not to mention good old Sancho Panza, and they all surrounded Don Fernando, begging him to look at the tears of Don Fernando. Dorotea, the priest said, that only death could separate Luscinda from Cardenio, and, even if the edges of some sword divided them, they would consider her death very happy. And, above all, he warned that if he prided himself on being a gentleman and a Christian, that he could not do anything other than keep his word, and that by keeping it, he would keep God and satisfy discreet people. Indeed, to these reasons they all added others, such and many, that Don Fernando's valiant chest, in short, as if nourished with illustrious blood, softened and allowed himself to be overcome by the truth, which he could not deny even if he wanted to, and the sign he gave of having surrendered to the good looks that had been proposed to him was to lower himself and embrace Dorotea, saying to her, Get up, my lady, it's not fair that the one I have in my soul should be kneeling at my feet. And if up to now I have not shown what I say, perhaps it has been by order of heaven, so that, seeing in you the faith with which you love me, I know how to estimate what you deserve. What I beg of you is that you do not reprimand me for my bad term and my great carelessness, because the same occasion and force that moved me to accept you for mine, that same impelled me to try not to be yours. And let this be true, go back and look into the eyes of the already happy Luscinda, and in them you will find an excuse for all my mistakes, and, since she found and achieved what she wanted, and I have found in you what fulfills me, may she live safe and happy long and happy years with her Cardenio, that I will pray to heaven to let me live with my Dorotea. And, saying this, he returned to embrace her and join her face with his, with such tender feeling, that it was necessary for him to take great care that the tears did not end up giving indubitable signs of her love and repentance. Those of Luscinda and Cardenio did not do so, and even those of almost all those who were present, because they began to pour out so many, some with their own contentment and others with someone else's, that it seemed nothing more than some serious and bad case to all had happened. Even Sancho Panza cried, although later he said that he was crying only to see that Dorotea was not, as he thought, the Micomicona queen, from whom he expected so many favors. And then Cardenio and Luscinda went to kneel before Don Fernando, thanking him for the favor he had done them with such courteous reasons. That Don Fernando did not know what to answer them, and so, he picked them up and embraced them with signs of much love and much courtesy. He then asked Dorotea to tell him how she had come to that place so far from hers. She, with brief and discreet reasons, told everything that she had previously told Cardenio. And just as he finished, Don Fernando told what had happened to him in the city after he found her paper in Luscinda's bosom, where she declared that she was Cardenio's wife and that she could not be his. He said that he wanted to kill her, and would do so if her parents were not prevented, and so, he left his house, scorned and run, determined to take revenge more comfortably, and that another day he found out how Luscinda had been absent from her parents' house, without anyone knowing where she had gone, and that, finally, after a few months he came to find out how she was in a monastery, willing to stay and he would spend his whole life if he couldn't spend it with Cardenio, and that, as soon as he knew it, choosing for his company those three gentlemen, he came to the place where he was, and thus, waiting one day for the porter's lodge to be open, he left the two to guard the door, and he, with another, they had entered the monastery looking for Luscinda, whom they found in the cloister talking to a nun, and, snatching her from her, without giving her room for anything else, they had come with her to a place where they accommodated what they needed to bring her. All of which they had been able to do well to their safety, since the monastery was in the country, a good distance outside the town. He said that as Luscinda saw herself in his power, he lost all senses, and that, after coming to himself, he had done nothing but cry and sigh, without speaking a word, and that thus, accompanied by silence and tears, they had arrived at that inn, which for him was to have reached heaven, where all the misfortunes on earth come to an end and come to an end. Chapter XXXVII. which continues the story of the famous Infanta Micomicona, with other funny adventures. Sancho listened to all this, not with a little pain in his soul, seeing that the hopes of his dictate had disappeared and gone up in smoke, and that the pretty Princess Micomicona had turned into Dorotea, and the giant into Don Fernando, and the master was sleeping soundly, very unaware of everything that had happened. Dorotea could not be sure if she was dreaming of the good that she possessed. Cardenio was in the same thought, and Luscinda's was on the same account. Don Fernando thanked heaven for the mercy received and for having taken him out of that intricate labyrinth. But the one who retired and was most content was the landlady, because of the promise that Cardenio and the priest had made to pay her all the damages and interest that Don Quixote had received. Only Sancho, as has already been said, was the afflicted, the unfortunate and the sad, and so, with a gloomy countenance, he entered his master, who had just awakened, to whom he said, "Your worship may well, Mr. Sad Figure, sleep as long as you like, without worrying about killing any giant, or going back to sleep. The princess her kingdom, that everything is already done and concluded." "I think so," responded Don Quixote, "because I have had the most colossal and outrageous battle with the giant that I intend to have in all the days of my life, and with a backhand, bang, I knocked his head to the ground, and so much blood came out that streams ran through the land as if they were made of water." "As if they were made of red wine, could your grace say better," answered Sancho, "because I want your worship to know, if it is that you don't know, that the dead giant is a pierced hide, and the blood, 6 arrobas of red wine. That she enclosed in her womb, and the severed head is the whore that gave birth to me, and let Satan take it all. Get up, your worship, and you will see what a good errand he has done, and what we have to pay, and he will see the queen turned into a particular lady, named Dorotea, with other events that, if he falls for them, he will admire." "I wouldn't be amazed at anything like that," Don Quixote replied, "because, although you remember, the other time we were here I told you that everything that happened here was enchanted, and it wouldn't be much if it were the same now. But it was not, but really and truly, and I saw that the innkeeper who is here today had one end of the blanket, and he was pushing me towards the sky with much grace and verve. Get me dressed and let me go out there, I want to see the events and transformations you mention." The priest told Don Fernando and the others about Don Quixote's follies. "No," said Don Fernando, "it doesn't have to be like that. I want Dorotea to continue her invention, that, as the place of this good gentleman is not very far from here, I will gladly let her seek her remedy." At this, Don Quixote came out. "I am informed, beautiful lady, of this my squire that your greatness has been annihilated. If this has been by order of your father's necromancer king, fearful that I would not give you the necessary and due help. Whoever told you, brave knight of the sad figure, that I had changed and changed my being, did not tell you the truth, because the same as yesterday I am today. What remains is that tomorrow we set out on the road, because today we will be able to do a short day." Discreet Dorotea said this, and when Don Quixote heard it, she turned to Sancho and, with signs of great anger, said, "Now I tell you, Sancho Lo, that you are the greatest miscreant in Spain. Tell me, wandering thief, didn't you just tell me now that this princess had turned into a maiden named Dorotea, and that the head I understand I cut off a giant was the whore that gave birth to you, with other nonsense that put me on edge? In the greatest confusion that I have ever been in all the days of my life." "Your worship, calm down, my lord," answered Sancho. "It could well be that I had deceived myself in regard to the mutation of the Princess Micomicona, but, as regards the giant's head, or, at least, the perforation of the hides and the fact that the blood is red wine, I am not mistaken." "Enough," said Don Fernando, "and let's not talk about this any more, and, well, the lady princess says that she should walk tomorrow, because today is already late, let it be done like this." Many words of restraint and many offers passed between Don Quixote and Don Fernando, but a passenger who at that time entered the sail silenced everything. He showed in his appearance that if he were well dressed, they would judge him as a person of quality and well born. He asked, on entering, for a room, and, as they told him that there was no room for him in the sail, he showed that he received grief, and going up to the one who looked like a Moorish in her dress, he lowered her into her arms. Luscinda, Dorotea, the landlady, her daughter, and Maritornes, dressed in new and never before seen clothes for them, surrounded the Moorish woman, and Dorotea, who was always graceful, restrained, and discreet, seemed to her that both she and the one who brought her were distressed. Due to the lack of the room, he told her, "Don't be too sorry, my lady, for the inconvenience of a gift that is missing here, since it is typical of sails not to be found in them, but, with all this, if you'd like to come with us," pointing to Luscinda, "perhaps in the discourse of this road you will have found other not so good welcomes." The cloaked woman did not respond to this, nor did she do anything other than get up from where she had been sitting, and, placing both hands crossed on her chest, bowing her head, she bent her body as a sign of gratitude. "My ladies, this maiden barely understands my language, nor does she know how to speak any other language except according to her own land, and for this reason she must not have responded, nor does she respond, to what she was asked. She doesn't ask her for anything else, answered Luscinda, other than to offer her our company for tonight and part of the place where we will settle down. Elamora, she is in her dress and in her body, but in her soul she is very great, she is a Christian, because she has great desires to be one. Then she is not she baptized herself? Luscinda replied. There was no place for it. Dorothea took her by the hand and led her to sit beside her, and begged her to take off her cloak. And so she took it from her, and she discovered a face so beautiful that Dorothea considered her more beautiful than Luscinda, and Luscinda more beautiful than Dorothea. And, as beauty has the prerogative and grace to reconcile spirits and attract wills, then they all surrendered to the desire to serve and caress the beautiful Moorish woman. Don Fernando asked the captive what the Moorish woman's name was, who replied that Leila Zoraida. No, not Zoraida, Maria, Maria. Inferring that her name was Maria and not Zoraida. By this time night had come, they all sat down at a long table, like a tinello. And so, they dined happily. Get away from me those who say that letters are an advantage over weapons, I will tell them, and whoever leaves, they don't know what they are saying. Because the reason that such people usually say, and what they adhere to the most, is that the work of the spirit exceeds that of the body, and that weapons are exercised only with the body, as if it were their exercise as a rancher, to which is not necessary more than good forces, or as if those of us who profess them were not enclosing acts of strength in what we call weapons, which require a great deal of understanding in order to execute them, or as if the spirit of the warrior who is in charge of an army, or the defense of a besieged city, did not work, both with the spirit and with the body. If not, see if it is possible with the physical forces to know and conjecture the intent of the enemy, the designs, the stratagems, the difficulties, the prevention of the damages that are feared, that all these things are actions of the intellect, in which the body has no part. Being so, that weapons require spirit, like letters, let us now see which of the two spirits, that of the lawyer or that of the warrior, works more. And this will come to be known by the end and whereabouts to which each one is heading, because that intention has to be esteemed more than it has as its object a nobler end. It is the end and whereabouts of the letters, and I am not speaking now of the divine ones, whose goal is to lead and direct souls to heaven, that to an end as endless as this no other can be equaled. I'm talking about human letters, whose purpose is to put distributive justice at its point and give each one what is theirs, understand and ensure that good laws are kept. And, by the way, generous and lofty and worthy of great praise, but not as much as he deserves who is served by weapons, which have peace as their object and purpose, which is the greatest good that men can desire in this life. And so, the first good news that the world had and that men had was that which was given by the angels on the night that was our day, when they sang in the air, Glory be in the highest, and peace on earth, to those who men of good will. I say, then, that the tasks of the student are these, mainly poverty, not because everyone is poor, but to put this case in all the extreme that it may be, and, having said that he suffers from poverty, it seems to me that there was no need to say more about his misfortune, because whoever is poor does not have anything good. This poverty is suffered by his parts, now in hunger, now in cold, now in nakedness, now in everything together, but, with all that, it's not so much that he doesn't eat, even if it's a little later than usual, even if it's from the leftovers of the rich, that it is the greatest misery of the student that among them they call going to the soup, and they do not lack some foreign brazier or fireplace, which, if it does not heat, at least warms their cold, and, finally, they sleep under the deck at night. I don't want to go into other trifles, it is convenient to know, about the lack of shirts and not too many shoes, the rarity and little hair of the dress, nor that shivering with such pleasure, when good luck holds a banquet for them. Along this path that I have painted, rough and difficult, stumbling here, falling there, rising there, falling again here, they reach the degree they desire, which reached, we have seen many who, having passed through these Sirtes and these Scyllas and Charybdis, as if carried in flight by favorable fortune, I say that we have seen them command and govern the world from a chair, justly deserved reward of their virtue. Chapter 38. Which deals with the curious speech that Don Quixote made about arms and letters. Well, we start with the student because of poverty and the parts of it, let's see if the soldier is richer. And we will see that there is no one poorer in the same poverty, because he is dependent on the misery of his pay, which comes sooner or later, or to what he scrambles through his hands, with notable danger to his life and his conscience. And sometimes his nakedness tends to be so much of him, that a slashed ponytail serves as his gala and shirt, and in the middle of winter he usually repairs himself from the inclemencies of the sky. Come a day of battle, that there they will put the tassel on his head, made of lint, to heal him from a bullet, which may have gone through his temples, or left him damaged in his arm or leg. And, when this does not happen, but the merciful heaven protects him and keeps him healthy and alive, it may be that he remains in the same poverty that he was before. How many less are those who have been rewarded by war than those who have perished in it? So, although the soldier's work is greater, the prize is much less. But to this one can reply that it is easier to reward 2,000 lawyers than 30,000 soldiers, because the former are rewarded by giving them trades, which must perforce be given to those of their profession, and the latter cannot be rewarded except with the same property of the gentleman whom they serve, and this impossibility further fortifies the reason I have. The letters say that without them weapons could not be sustained, because war also has its laws and is subject to them, and that the laws fall below what are letters and lawyers. To this the weapons respond that the laws cannot be sustained without them, because with the weapons the republics are defended, the kingdoms are preserved, the cities are guarded, the roads are secured. If it were not for them, the republics, the kingdoms, the monarchies, the cities, the sea and land roads would be subject to the rigor and confusion that war brings with it for as long as it lasts and has license to use its privileges and its forces. And it is proven reason that what costs the most is estimated and should be estimated at more. Reaching someone to be eminent in letters costs him time, vigils, hunger, nudity, dizziness of the head, indigestion of the stomach, but to arrive on his terms to be a good soldier costs everything to the student, to a greater degree than he has no comparison, because at every step he is on the brink of losing his life. And so, considering this, I am about to say that my soul regrets having taken this exercise of a knight-errant in an age as detestable as the one in which we now live, because, although I am not afraid of any danger, it still makes me suspicious to think if gunpowder and tin will take away the opportunity to become famous and known for the value of my arm and the edges of my sword, for everything discovered in the earth. But heaven do what is served, that I will be so much more esteemed, if I get what I want, as much as I have put myself in greater danger than the knights-errant of past centuries. All this long preamble, said Don Quixote. In those he had listened to, a new pity came over him to see that a man who, apparently, had a good understanding and good speech in all the things he dealt with, had lost him so completely, in treating him of his black and pimply cavalry. Don Fernando begged the captive to tell them the speech of his life. To which the captive replied that he would gladly do as he was told. Chapter 36. Where the captive recounts his life and his events in a place in the Leon Mountains. My lineage began. My father still had a reputation for being rich, and he truly would be so if he managed to preserve his estate as it was given to him in Gastalla. My father had 3, all boys. Seeing, then, that, according to what he said, he could not go to the hand against his condition, he wanted to deprive himself of the instrument and cause that made him spendthrift and generous, which was to deprive himself of the property. And so, one day calling all 3 of us alone in a room, he told us some reasons similar to those I will say now. Children, to tell you that I love you well, it is enough to know and say that you are my children, and, to understand that I don't want you badly, it's enough to know that I'm not going to the hand when it comes to preserving your property. Well, so that you understand from now on that I love you as a father, and that I do not want to destroy you as a stepfather, I want to do something with you that I have been thinking about for many days and with mature consideration ready. You are already at an age to take a state, or, at least, to choose exercise, such that, when you are older, it will honor you and take advantage of it. And what I have thought of is to make my property 4 parts, the 3 I will give to you, to each one what he will have, without exceeding anything, and with the other I will stay to live and sustain myself the days that heaven be served to give me life. But I would like that, after each one had in his possession the part that belongs to him of his property, he would follow one of the paths that I will tell him about. Church, or sea, or royal house, as if it were more clearly said, whoever wants to be worthy and rich, either follow the church, or sail, exercising the art of merchandise, or enter to serve the kings in their houses, because they say, a king's crumb is better than the mercy of a lord. I say this because I would like, and it is my will, that one of you follow the letters, the other the merchandise, and the other serve the king in war, since it is difficult to enter to serve him in his house, that, since war does not give much wealth, it usually gives a lot of value and a lot of fame. And, commanding me, for being the eldest, that mine was to continue the exercise of arms, serving God and my king in it. The second brother made the same offers, and chose to go to the Indies, employing whatever hacienda fit him. The youngest, and, to what I believe, the most discreet, said that he wanted to follow the church, or go to finish his studies in Salamanca. He put into action what he had promised us, and, giving to each one the part of it, which, as far as I remember, were each 3,000 ducats. I made him take the 2,000 ducats from my 3,000, because the rest was enough for me to accommodate what a soldier needed. My 2 brothers, moved by my example, each gave him 1,000 ducats, so that my father had 4,000 in money left, and another 3,000, which, it seems, was worth the property that fit him, which is not wanted to sell, but stay with her in roots. This one has been 22 years since I left my father's house, and in all of them, since I have written some letters, I have not heard from him or from my brothers. I say, finally, that I found myself on that very happy day, already made an infantry captain, to whose honorable position my good luck raised me, more than my merits. What made his death most pitiful was having died at the hands of some Arabs whom he trusted, seeing the fort already lost, who offered to take him in Moorish habit to Tabarca, which is a portazuelo or house that in those days the Genos who exercise in the coral fishery have the river banks, whose heads were cut off by Arabs and brought to the general of the Turkish army, who fulfilled our Castilian proverb with them, that although treason postpones, the traitor hates, and so, it is said, that the general had those who brought him the present hanged, because they had not brought him alive. Thanks be given to God, for so many favors as he did him, because there is no one on earth, according to my opinion, that is equal to achieving lost freedom.